Good. All right, so we're gonna start with our next company, Hyliion, located in Cedar Park, Texas. That's just outside of Austin. They're a leading provider of electrified powertrain solutions. They're targeting the commercial vehicle industry, and more specifically, at least for now, the Class 8 market. I'm just going to walk through the cap table here. 178 million shares out, stocks at about $8 currently, $1.4 billion market cap, 460-ish of net cash for a 960 million total enterprise value. Very excited to introduce Thomas Healy, who's Hyliion's founder and CEO, and also joining him is Sherry Baker, their CFO. So wanted to thank both of you for joining us this afternoon, and welcome.
Appreciate you having us. Great to be here. Sorry that we are virtual for everyone that's there in the room.
Well, there's always next year, so
we'll be there, and we'll bring a truck with us. How about that?
That'll be great. So I just wanted to start at first, maybe for those in the room or and online who are maybe not as familiar with Hyliion, but maybe just provide us with an overview of your two core products. You have the hybrid EX and also your Hypertruck ERX. Maybe talk about the products themselves and then also where we are in terms of the development process there.
Absolutely, and I'm going to do a share screen, so hopefully you all can now see that.
Yep.
Terrific. All right. Well, before giving too much background on Hyliion, I figured it made sense to just start off with a little background on the trucking world right now and what's going on with electrification. So I'm sure everyone in the audience is aware electrification is here, it's coming, it's happening. And we're at a phase today where fleets are really trying to figure out what electrified solution is going to be right for their operations. And, very different than the passenger car space, the trucking world is not a one size fits all solution. There's different types of electric vehicles. So, as we think about the passenger car space, we really think about the BEV plug-in vehicle, which is effectively your Tesla car. As you look at trucking, though, there are a lot of things that prohibit BEV electric trucks from really working. You've got, as opposed to trying to drive 30 miles to work, you're now trying to drive 500 miles in a day to get to your next stop. Similarly, you're trying to haul 80,000 pounds of cargo. So, as you think about electrification, there's really two different types. You have a BEV plug-in, which we see as going to be the right solution for local delivery, short haul type applications. And then you have a full electric range extender vehicle, which we see as being the right solution for that long haul over the road market. And that's the market that we're going after, we're addressing. We think it's the biggest problem to solve and the one that has the most upside potential due to market share, of the trucking industry. So as the slide says, a little background on us, our goal is to be a leading provider of electrified powertrain solutions to the commercial vehicle market. So one big thing to note there is that we're a powertrain company. So we're not trying to develop the entire vehicle from the ground up. We're actually working with the existing truck makers, taking the chassis that they make, which are terrific vehicles, and we're putting a new powertrain in them, which is a full electric range extender solution. And the focus of our solutions are driving lower costs, having net negative emission profile potential for these vehicles, utilizing existing infrastructure. And then, the last one on the slide, which you'll see there, is really having a solution that is fastest to market. And one of the things we often focus on as an organization is really bringing forward practical solutions. So as I go forward through the next slides here, hopefully you see that as kind of a recurring theme. So the first slide here is really the two different products that we're bringing to market. So the first is our hybrid electric solution, which is a product that we actually are already shipping to fleets today. We already have millions of miles already driven on this in real world conditions. And the way this product works is we actually replace the rearmost axle of the truck with an e-axle, and then we mount a battery pack onto the frame rail, and you effectively have a very large Toyota Prius. That's the best way to think about it. And then on the right-hand side of the screen, you've got our full electric range extender vehicle. And this is really the vehicle that we see as being the most applicable fit for that long haul over the road market that often hits those hurdles of BEV plug-in vehicles that I mentioned. And so with this truck, what we're able to do is actually bring fuel with us and convert that fuel into electricity to charge the batteries as the truck is going down the road. And one of the interesting things that we've laid out with that range extender vehicle is, while there is so much discussion and excitement around hydrogen and that being the fuel of the future, we actually don't see that as the right fuel for today or for the near term here. We actually see natural gas, and more specifically renewable natural gas, as the right fuel source for us to start with today for electric range extender vehicles, and then eventually evolving into hydrogen fuel cell electric vehicles. Now, one of the neat things that we found as an organization is that the architecture of a vehicle, whether it's a natural gas range extender or a hydrogen range extender, the vehicle is primarily the same. The batteries are the same, the electric motors are the same. The thing that changes is that generator you have under the hood and the fuel storage tanks. And so what we've set up is a roadmap here where we can start with natural gas and then over time evolve into a hydrogen-based future. And one thing that we've put in our roadmap, which is different than some of the other companies out there, is having a fuel agnostic generator solution. And so that means that the genset under the hood, the generator producing electricity, could run on either natural gas or hydrogen. So next slide here talks a little bit about why we see natural gas or renewable natural gas as the right fuel source for today. The kind of a few different buckets that equate to different fuel sources. The first can be what infrastructure is out there, what's the emission profile that's going to come from it, and then the last one is cost. So on this slide, we touch on the infrastructure. So one of the great things with natural gas is that for the Class 8 semi-truck market, there are already over 700 stations in existence, built out across North America, that you can pull into today and refuel your semi-truck off of natural gas. And so with our solution, we're able to piggyback on those already existing stations. And with a vehicle that has over 1,000 miles of range, you'll easily pass multiple stations on a normal route across the country. And because we're able to use those existing stations out there, we're able to forgo having that massive infrastructure costs that both BEV trucks and hydrogen fuel cell trucks are often faced with. And as you can see on the slide here, for hydrogen, it's projected that you can be north of $10 billion in order to set up an infrastructure that would just be comparable to the existing natural gas stations that are already out there today. And then the middle box here is one of the things that we see as a huge win, which is really the emissions profile that comes out of these vehicles. So one of the things that's often not spoken about is really the full well-to-wheel emissions profile of a truck. And as we look at companies that are setting out net zero emissions targets, they really can't just look at what the tailpipe emissions are of the vehicle. They actually have to look at what's the emissions that's going to come from the actual fuel that's used in the truck. And most fuel used today, like if you look at hydrogen, much of it is produced through a pretty pollutive process, which is actually in many instances more pollutive than just even running diesel fuel today. Similarly, when you look at grid electricity, while there are often benefits over diesel, you still have emissions, whether it comes from a coal-fired power plant or it's a very small percentage of the electricity that actually comes from truly renewable sources like wind and solar and hydro. But then when you look at natural gas and specifically RNG, you actually open up this opportunity to have a net carbon negative or below zero emissions profile. So in a weird way of thinking about it, it can actually be net carbon negative, or it's actually cleaner for the environment in some cases to drive our truck than to not. And the way we're able to achieve that is through another mega trend going on, which is renewable natural gas, which is basically a process of capturing methane coming off of landfills and dairy farms and actually utilizing that methane as fuel, as opposed to just letting it gas off into the atmosphere and be a pollutant. So another way of thinking of it, it's almost like we're able to take pollution and use that to recharge our battery pack. And a lot of you are probably thinking, okay, well, that's probably some super small percentage of the market that can actually run on that. But as the right-hand side of the slide shows here, last year, the US was able to surpass that over more than 50%, 53% of the natural gas sold at stations last year was actually already sourced from renewable natural gas. And that number is increasing every single year. And so this is a truly prevalent fuel source. It's available, it's out there, and it's cost competitive. That's the last thing to mention on this slide is just that renewable natural gas today, and natural gas as well, is already at a price point where it's significantly less expensive than diesel. Versus when you look at hydrogen, it's often, it is more expensive than diesel. Same thing with grid electricity, it will often be more expensive than diesel is. And so that's one of our big competitive advantages is that we are able to use a very low cost fuel source in order to produce electricity to charge up our truck. And then the last thing I wanted to touch on before opening it up to any Q&A is just one of our competitive differentiations, which is really the software in these vehicles. So even with our hybrid products that we've got out on the road today, these trucks will generate and monitor over a gigabyte of data per day per vehicle out on the road. So this really opens up a big data opportunity for us. And this is something that we're able to process that data locally on the truck. We send some of it up to the cloud, and then we're able to do some really neat things with that data once we're able to capture it. And so as we look at our roadmap as the future of the company, we plan on getting into things like predictive maintenance and vehicle analytics, and seeing how we can take the information that we're getting off this truck, which is truly a massive amount of data, and actually makes smart suggestions or advise fleets on how they can operate their fleets more efficiently and really improve the uptime of these assets out as they're out on the road, which will ultimately return a better ROI for the customer. So with that, that's a little overview on us as an organization. I'll pause there and hand it over to any questions you guys have.
No, that's great. I appreciate the slides. Definitely helps everyone get up kind of the learning curve of what you guys do and kind of where you're at in the process. Maybe if we could dig in a little bit on, the total cost of ownership for your products. I'm not sure if you want to talk about the hybrid or the ERX, but maybe just talk about the savings. And I'm not sure if there's an average payback that you guys typically talk to, but maybe give us a framework in terms of the investment up front and then how long it takes for anyone buying your product to recoup that investment.
Yeah, absolutely. So maybe just to start at the high level here, because I think this is a key differentiator, is when a lot of people think about going and buying an electric vehicle, they kind of think about their individual experience of going and buying an electric car. And for anyone in the audience that maybe is driving an electric car, I would almost guarantee that you didn't sit down and pencil out the TCO calculation of, is this going to save me money or is it not? The passenger car buying experiences for an electric vehicle is much more of an emotional decision and wanting to be a part of this shift towards electrification than it is necessarily a TCO model. Now, that is flipped on its head in the commercial vehicle world. What these fleets utilize these assets as part of their business. And so for them, they need to be able to drive a better payback or a lesser operating cost than a diesel truck. And that's one of the big things that we focus on through our product development is not only do we want to pull electrification forward for the benefits of emissions, but we have to do it in a way, or in order to get significant adoption in trucking, we have to do it in a way where it can actually reduce operating costs. So, as we look at our hybrid system, the goal of that is to either be able to reduce how much fuel the vehicle is consuming, so thus reducing operating costs, or we can also put that product on a conventional natural gas truck, and it applies more horsepower and torque so that you can move to natural gas as a fuel source and thus reduce your operating expenses. Or as we look at the Hypertruck product, one of the things that I had mentioned, as we were going through the slides, was we actually use a low-cost fuel source. So natural gas can often be about half or a third the cost of diesel fuel. And so while we do have a higher upfront cost of the vehicle, the fact that we use a fuel source that is significantly less than the cost of diesel allows us to have that positive ROI for the fleet. Now, in fleet operations, it's going to really vary based on what sort of duty cycle is running. But it can be anywhere from like around a 4-year sort of a period where you've actually saved more in your fuel cost than that upfront additional cost of the vehicle. And for many fleets, that's a huge win, and that's the type of time frame that they need to hit in order to see a positive return on the asset.
Okay, that's helpful. And then you mentioned that there's a gain of functionality of power with some of your products versus conventional internal combustion engine vehicle. Maybe if you could provide some of those numbers if you have them.
Yeah, absolutely. So for some of you in the audience, you may have seen some videos that we put out there last year of our ERX vehicle doing some burnouts in the back parking lot here at Hyliion. And so that's the cool thing with an electric truck is it's got a lot of horsepower, a lot of torque. Now, we have gotten some advice from some fleet owners that they don't want their drivers to be able to do burnouts. So thankfully, we're able to regulate that with the software and scale it back to being able to supply equal or just more power than a diesel truck. But that this kind of opens up a whole nother topic that we haven't spoken about, which is really driver retention and driver acceptance. So one of the things that we've seen become more and more prevalent over the last few years here is the large fleets are buying newer and newer trucks, right? They're getting rid of their old trucks quickly because they want to be able to attract new drivers and retain drivers because they have newer vehicles. So that's one of the big things that we're going to see happen with electric as well is, if you get that behind the wheel of an electric semi truck, it is truly a surreal experience compared to a normal diesel. And so from that standpoint, as we think about driver retention in a time where drivers are hard to come by and there's a huge driver shortage right now, if you are a fleet operator who can offer your drivers an electric vehicle and a very an awesome driving experience, that's something that's going to help with retaining drivers. So we see that as a whole nother selling point of the product that you don't even take into account in the TCO model.
Right. And then you're providing the entire the powertrain. You're not building the actual trucks. You're not doing individual components. Maybe if you could just talk to who you see as your direct competitors here.
Sure. Maybe I'll take the competitor one on, and then sure, if you want to take on kind of the asset light approach of the business model. But as we look at competitors, there's different players in that BEV plug-in vehicle, like Tesla is probably the most common one spoken about, as well as a lot of the conventional truck OEMs are developing BEV plug-in vehicles. These will normally have a range of about 150 miles or so. And so then we really are addressing the longer haul part of the market, which is the majority of trucking, right? You're driving 300 to 500, maybe even 600 miles a day on the truck. That's the market we're going after. Now, that market's kind of broken into two. You have the vehicles that are going to produce electricity with natural gas and the ones that are going to use hydrogen. We've seen a lot of the market is actually focusing on that hydrogen space. And that leaves us to be, the player for electric natural gas range extender vehicles, and then being able to evolve into hydrogen over time. So we really see that, we're the thought leader in that space. And with that, I'll hand it to Sherry.
No, thanks, Thomas. And a very important part of our business model is we're taking an asset light approach. So as you just mentioned, that we are not building the whole truck, we are really more doing assembly, and we will be doing really strategic partnerships with a lot of industry experts and leaders in the space, so that as we're in low volume production, we can do that here at our facility here in Austin, and then we will partner up with mod centers to do installations as we're starting to grow the business. And then ultimately with the goal of getting onto the OEM lines at the point in time when we reach the size and scale that becomes an attractive solution. But with the amount of money that we were able to raise when we went public as of the end of Q2, we were sitting on well over $600 million between our cash equivalents, and and our investments, which typically are on average, call it, 18 months. So a very great liquidity position for us, different than a lot of others in this space. And that should take us well through the commercialization efforts, not only from a hybrid, but also from a hypertruck perspective as well.
Great. That's helpful. And then I'm going to kind of just lay out kind of a broader question, but, thinking about the path of the commercial vehicle market, and making the transition to lower zero emissions, vehicles, maybe talk about the time frame. How long does this take? I know we're starting to see some orders, but they're more for all companies, more kind of test orders, if you will, or prototype orders. But I just like to get your general thoughts on, how long does it take for the market to kind of tip to a point where we're seeing orders on more of a kind of fleet or a commercial, a commercial scale?
Yeah, the thing that we've heard from a lot of fleets is they have to be able to experience and see and feel the truck and actually go drive it before they're going to go make commitments to move a substantial amount of their fleet over to a new type of powertrain or a new vehicle, right? So I think that's a phase that a lot of the market is in right now, where it's these kind of early prototype vehicles that are starting to get put in fleet operations. I think I've got a slide on it that I didn't include in today's presentation, but it breaks up the market into three categories. You have the public perception, you have where fleets are at, and you have where the suppliers like the OEMs and the companies like Hyliion are at. And it's kind of all at different stages. The public markets thinks that electrification is already happening and there are thousands of electric trucks out on the road. That's not the case. We're just getting into kind of early rollout of vehicles and fleet operations. Then you've got the fleets who are like here today, want it, they're ready to adopt the assets and the products, they want electrification. And then you've got the suppliers who are working as fast as they can to try to get solutions to market, with keeping in mind that we need to bring reliable solutions to market. And so we truly are in a phase right now where it is just early adoption and early rollout of trucks, and usually they are prototype trucks. And so from that standpoint, we see as a company that we really have an advantage twofold. One is that we've already got a hybrid product that we're shipping. We've learned from it. We've had a lot of great experiences to be able to improve that product. And then two, we have a product with the Hypertruck ERX that leverages things that are already in place. So as you think about, a fleet either adopting a natural gas electric truck versus a hydrogen fuel cell electric truck, with hydrogen, you got to go wait until someone builds out infrastructure, someone figures out how to bring hydrogen costs down. We need to make green hydrogen, and we got to figure out how to transport hydrogen around. So there's a lot of things that need to take place, and we still need to develop hydrogen fuel cell trucks. So there's like a lot of things that go into deploying a hydrogen fuel cell truck. Versus with our solution, with natural gas stations are already out there. It's already low cost. The pipelines are already in place. We can transport natural gas around easily. And we have a renewable natural gas that's abundant, as we saw earlier, over 50% of the natural gas sold to stations, which has a great emissions profile. And then, so the new aspect is us bringing forward an electric range extender truck. So we see that as being a huge competitive advantage for us in order to get our solution to market faster than some of the others in the space.
Great. Do you think the current natural gas, transportation infrastructure that's in place, I think on one of your slides you talked to, I think is 800 stations currently within the U.S. Maybe that number's not exact, but I'm just curious to hear from you if you think the infrastructure that's currently in place is sufficient to, support kind of a broader fleet of trucks that are using your technology or leveraging other technologies on the natural gas side of things.
Yeah, so the over 700 stations that I mentioned earlier, that is plenty robust enough to get us started and to get thousands of trucks out on the road. And then from there, what we expect will happen is as a fleet really starts to substantially adopt natural gas electric trucks, then what they'll do is they'll likely put fueling stations either right nearby or on site their operations. But to get the initial rollout of trucks out there and thousands of vehicles on the road, the infrastructure is plenty, and so we're not in a phase today where we have to have more stations built out.
Great. And then maybe talk to, you know, some of your partners at this point in time. You know, you've announced, right, partners that are working with you who are testing and utilizing both the hybrid and are testing the ERX product. But maybe just if you could talk to those, you know, those partners.
Yeah. So one of the things we announced earlier this year was a Hypertruck Fleet Council. It involves some of the largest fleets here in the U.S. And some international players. So we've got fleets like Ryder, Penske, Werner, Schneider, Anheuser-Busch, Agility, and others who are a part of that fleet council. And you know, what we really did is we pulled this together as a group that will be there with us as we go through the rollout process of our technology. And so, as we've previously mentioned, we are in a phase now where in the latter part of this year, we will start the fleet demos and showcasing these trucks with these fleets. And so, so that's really the next milestone that's ahead of us here. And then from there, the goal will be to start actually putting these assets in these fleets operations. And then from there, you know, long-term goal is have it be their powertrain of choice as they're buying new trucks. So we feel like we've got a really great group of partners around us, and you know, these fleets that we've pulled together in the Hypertruck Innovation Council, who will be the initial ones that we really launch this technology with. And then we've been really fortunate that we have other fleets who have reached out and expressed they want to be early adopters of the Hypertruck solution as well. And so from there, you know, we will pull them in to be part of the early rollout process as well.
Great. And then looking at the looking at the overall opportunities, I think the focus right now is on the North American market and specifically within the US, but maybe thinking out longer term, if you could talk to some of the international markets, if that's the direction you decide to go in, what are some of the more attractive markets on the CV side from an international perspective?
Yeah, sure. Do you want to take the international focus one?
Yeah, so we certainly have gotten a lot of interest from the European market. So we think that that's still a fantastic opportunity for us, although we really want to prove out the technology here in our backyard. So hence the reason why we wanted to start here in the US and North America. But then we will, quickly look to, as we're scaling up our organization, that we will look to expand into the European market probably next. But we want to make sure that we get the products, squared away here in the US first.
Okay, great. And then we're kind of getting closer to the end here in terms of time. Last question, maybe just remind us of the expectations for, commercialization, the targeted commercialization on both products.
Yeah, so on the hybrid pieces, we announced on our last call that we expect to begin shipping revenue recognizable units by the end of this year. And on the Hypertruck, as Thomas was just alluding to, getting the initial demos and getting fleets to experience it through ride-alongs will be the end of this year and going into next year, and then getting the fleets to experience it within their own fleets, and then followed by commercialization and ramp up, as we said on the last call, it was in the late 22, followed by commercialization and volume production after that. And we have our earnings call here in about 10 days. So we will provide any appropriate updates on our next earnings call next week.
Excellent. Well, Thomas and Sherry, thank you so much for joining us. We very much appreciate you guys taking the time out. Hopefully maybe next year you're here in person and we can maybe do burnouts in the parking lot of the Waldorf.
Sounds like a plan.
Okay.
Thanks, everyone.
Wonderful.
Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.